Hello, I'm here. Welcome to another episode. I guess we call these episodes, right? Of the Walter Bosley channel. And I hope you're having a good weekend. November just raced by. So, not much left to the rest of this year. I don't know if I mentioned it to you guys, but the Talbot Mundy book, Winds of the World, is available. And this guy was one of the most influential pulp era classic adventure authors ever. And this is considered one of his best. As you know, with Lost Continent Library, let's see, that way. I do classic reprints, just like I do with the nonfiction, but that one's available. And speaking of pulp adventure and things of the sort, that brings me right into the topic that I wanted to just kind of do a casual entry into, because I will return to this topic. It is one of the more interesting subjects that comes up in the history of strange, mysterious influences on the 20th century, specifically World War II. Most famously, this is brought up, I think, in connection with Nazi Germany and World War II, the occultists, specifically the Ahnenerbe of Heinrich Himmler and so forth. And what am I speaking of? I'm speaking of the Order of the Green Dragon. Now, most people, their introduction to this is hearing this tale that as the story goes, the Russians, when they finally invaded Berlin, and in one of the buildings, off the top of my head, I can't remember which building it was, but that's typical of these kinds of stories, right? They found, and I've heard various versions of this, but they found bodies of several Tibetan males wearing German uniforms without insignia, without rank. But one of them, who appeared to be the leader, was wearing green gloves. Now, they were all dead, but they were lying there in repose, and the alleged leader was wearing green gloves. And this is usually the popular part of the story that people hear, because it serves the whole narrative of the Nazis and the occult, which is very popular in our community, of course. But is there anything to it? Now, in the lore and legends of, we still have to come up with a title for this aspect of our community. But when you combine historical conspiracy theory with the mysticism and the New Age occult realm that had emerged through spiritualism in the 19th century, it's that milieu. Okay, so I'll use the word milieu. It emerges from that milieu that there was this secret, mystical, to be redundant on linguistics, order known as the Green Dragon. Now, when you look at history, you go to determine if there's any truth to this, you end up in Japan. In Japan, late 19th going into the 20th centuries, there was a lot of activity of a group called the Order of the Black Dragon. And you can trace them through connections to the Yakuza and various political influences. And as the one historian put it, that I did my research through. The Yakuza were the agents who were willing to do the things that the samurai were not. Now, if you understand um, just the rudiments of what was going on in Japanese history at the time, the Order of the Black Dragon was very influential in moving Japan from the old, traditional feudal culture into a modern nation. Okay. And the samurai class, they were the ones who, their power suffered for that. And it with the shift of the power and the shift of the focus on the direction Japan was going to go in the future, it allowed the Yakuza to fill certain voids, and also the Order of the Black Dragon. The leader of the Order of the Black Dragon had a connection to the Yakuza, and before this, and never severed those connections. In fact, the Black Dragon organization used the Yakuza repeatedly. The Yakuza, yeah, pardon my mispronunciations. So there is traceable evidence, historical documentation that you can find the Order of the Black Dragon pretty easily. Okay, you can prove their existence. What's more difficult is the Order of the Green Dragon, okay, because their origin is quite frankly murky, and the sources that are available that talk about it are really questionable. And for instance, in one source that I was looking at, they referred to, when talking about the Order of the Green Dragon, they referred to the book Morning of the Magicians. Now, of course, I, like many others, have that book in my library. This book here, The Morning of the Magicians, I think it was published in 1960. There's big problems with this book, as any scholar will tell you. There's stuff in here that either isn't sourced or comes from very questionable sources. Now, what's interesting is when you have one source talking about the Green Dragon and they reference this book, there is no mention of the Green Dragon by name in this book. So what you figure out, you kind of left to figure out on your own, is that particular source misreferred to the book, or was referring specifically to the legendary connection between the rise of Nazi Germany and Japanese occult orders. Because the Order of the Green Dragon is traced to Japan first when you look more closely at it than what is popular. Popularly, most people would immediately think of Tibet when they think of this Green Dragon Order, but no, it actually has its origins in Japan. Now, eventually, there came a Tibetan connection, because you see what was driving the Order of the Black Dragon, the leader of the Order of the Black Dragon, and the influential Japanese leaders who were moving Japan forward into a modern future. They had a vision of a strong Asia, this big Asian empire, of course, led by Japan, a strong Japan. So the Japanese leader of the organization would use any Chinese agents that he could, control, any Tibetans, and they were known to have used agents from all over Asia. This was, the goal, the objective, to have the influence, have the control, be the spy master, the master of everything in Asia. As I said, an Asian empire controlled by Japan. So this seems to be where the connection to Tibet comes into play, um, and would seem to explain this story of these dead Tibetan males in these uniforms and the one with the green gloves. Now, years ago, the version of the story I heard was that they were all wearing green gloves. Now, there was an organization believed to exist that was known as the Green Hand. So, what you've got are all these different ideas and stories and rumors swimming around out there that it looks like they ultimately went in and influenced what appears to actually be the source of this World War II story, which I will get to soon enough. But you really have to start if you want to understand what the Order of the Green Dragon was or may have been. You do have to start with the Order of the Black Dragon, okay? Um, and you start in Japan. One of the things that the Black Dragon, for instance, was pushing was a Mongol kingdom, a modern Mongol kingdom between controlled by Japan and China. Okay, but the problem they had were the Russians. So they focused their agents and their efforts, this particular group, the Black Dragon, and those they influenced against the Russians. Now, this dates back to what's known as the Great Game, which was what they called the competition between England and Russia over India, over the subcontinent in Central Asia. Okay. So you had the Black Dragon with its hand in the Great Game. How you know the Chinese would attempt to influence it, how Japan would attempt to influence things in that effort, um, usually against Russia, okay, and working with anybody they could to affect Russia in a negative manner. So, this dates back well before World War II, all this involvement. And at the same time, we are supposed to believe that the Order of the Green Dragon existed at the same time, coexisted. Now, many of you who have read my first Empire of the Wheel book, which I co authored with Richard Spence. I don't know if you've checked it out yet, but there's a channel or a show, a network or whatever called Wondrium. And when I was doing my research for this, I referred to Rick's episode on Wondrium about the Green Dragon. And to get a better sense than I'm giving you of how this all fits together, I recommend you go watch that video because Rick really, lays it out like only a professional history professor can do. Where I come in on this is the little hypothesis that this data leads to, I think, in my humble opinion. Now, the way Rick laid it out and the way the sources indicate is that the Order of the Black Dragon, they did things in the political and criminal realms, okay, but they went directly at political and financial influences to pursue their objective, okay? And the Order of the Green Dragon, they were after the same objective, and that is Japan essentially running a huge Asian empire, okay? They had the same goal, the same objective, but the Order of the Green Dragon, we are led to believe, pursued this objective through mystical pursuits, occult methods and pursuits, which, you know, is understandable why it would be so popular in our community and within the milieu of the 19th century spiritualist occultists, and then into the 20th century with the occultists of Germany, especially during World War II. And what we can't ignore is that the pulp era of literature was smack dab at the heart of this era. So this is what jumped out at me. The first mention of an Order of the Green Dragon is not, as one might expect, in the annals of the 19th century mystics. It's not even, it doesn't even come from Helena Blavatsky or Theosophy. There are pieces of similar things talked about and written about, but as such, the Order of the Green Dragon is first mentioned in a pulp novel. Imagine that. A pulp novel published years before World War II what year was it? I want to say 33. Anyway, in the 1930s, this pulp novel titled the Seven Heads of the Green Dragon. Okay. And it has all the things you would imagine. It has a Fu Manchu type of villain, but we're going to get more into him in just a moment, because that's where, in my mind, what I'm suspecting, that's where it jumped out at me. But this novel was written by a guy named Teddy Legrand. More on him in a moment also. Now, to go back to the alleged reported Russian discovery of these Tibetan males, dead Tibetan males, and one of the versions talks about them lined up in a circle, laid out in a circle, their bodies with the green gloved leader, in the middle or at the head of them or whatever. Now, when you look at the German expeditions into Tibet, which is where people often, go to when they're making their conclusions about the story of the Tibetans and the man with the green gloves, they say, well, yeah, look at that. Himmler sent the German scientists of the Ahnenerbe, the anthropologists and such, sent them on this expedition to Tibet in the late 30s. And that must have been where they, met the High Lama and the secret organization, and that must have been, where they got their secrets. Even to go so far when people say they must have got their Haunebu flying saucer technology and stuff there, right? Well, when you look more closely, particularly at the Ernst Schaefer expedition, who went over there on behalf of Himmler, you really find out that he had little to no respect for the Tibetans. I mean, you could say he hated them, and he hated their culture. The author, his last name's Hale, who's written the book on Himmler's expedition to, let me see, do I got that one sitting right here? I think I might. Oh, yes, I do. That's why I have a stack of books handy. Yeah, this is written by, I recommend this book. It's titled Himmler's Crusade, okay? And it is by Christopher Hale. Yeah, Himmler's Crusade by Christopher Hale. You learn that that Ernst Schaefer disrespected the Tibetans and the other non-whites that he found on his expedition, even more so than Heinrich Himmler, if you could imagine that. Hale cites sources that show that Himmler ordered Schaefer to edit and censor his derogatory comments about the Tibet, because his reasoning was, when we have our huge empire and we take over Asia, um, they're going to be our allies against, you know, the Chinese or whoever, the Russians eventually too. So even Himmler told Schaefer to tone down his disregard and disrespect. So when you have the leader of, he went on a couple of them. I believe Schaefer was on one of the Sven Hedden expeditions, and he didn't like him either. Schaefer was a very arrogant guy. And then when he went on his own expedition, he's the leader of the expedition, right? Now, if there was some type of occult and mystical shenanigans going on, that the Nazis made their secret contacts with an unknown organization, with some mystical order of the Green Dragon in Tibet, then I guess they would have had to have made those contacts and developed that relationship under the nose of Ernst Schaefer. But I think my impression is that would have been pretty difficult. Not impossible, because I know very well, like you guys know, that intelligence agents can operate anywhere. And if they're doing their job right, not even an arrogant, grouchy boss will know that it's being done. But don't think that Schaefer would have had enough respect for any Tibetans he encountered to establish and nurture some type of relationship with Tibetan mystics, okay? Because he had a very low opinion of their Buddhism and their mysticism. Of course, it was the Bon religion before that. How any association to Nazi Germany between, some mystical order of Tibetans could have occurred, we don't really have a good source on that. And as I said, there's a little problem with the pulp novel, The Seven Heads of the Green Dragon. But I'm going to get back to that, as I said. Now, there is a history with Russia in the mix on this. A Baltic-born military officer, Baltic-born German officer, okay? He was really enamored of Asia and Tibet, and in particular Buddhism. In fact, he had established an order of Buddhist soldiers, European Buddhist soldiers. He really got into this, and I'll get more into him on another episode, because I'm going to be talking about this again, because it gets into Ferdinand Ossendowski, who I've talked about before, and Agartha and all this stuff. And that's within the context you guys have usually probably heard of this mystical Tibetan order of the Green Dragon, which, as we find out, actually has its origins in Japan for very political reasons. So anyway, back to this alleged connection between the Nazis and these Tibetan mystics. When you look at just traditional history, and you guys know that I'm somebody who's I include traditional history, I consult traditional history, but I also see the gaps in that, and I'm not afraid to question that narrative, as you know. But we do have to acknowledge it, and in traditional history, it doesn't appear that there would have been any overt respect, at least on the part of the guy in charge of the expedition that often gets cited. Now, what Himmler might have done on the side with agents, again, that's a whole other discussion. And you guys know that I'm a nugget of truth guy. But what I wanted to point out was when I learned about this pulp novel and that Teddy Legrand was a pseudonym, he didn't really exist. There are two suspects, both of them Frenchmen, French journalists, and they both, if I'm not mistaken, they both died during the war. The gears started going in my head. World War II, French resistance to the Nazis, pulp novels. And then I'm thinking, Seven Heads of the Green Dragon, and the main character happens to be named James Nobody. Now, how many of you are familiar with anagrams or like to have fun with anagrams or see what kind of words you can come out of something? I believe in the word nobody, you can pull out the 4 letters to spell the name Bond. B-O-N-D. And when you think about it, isn't Bond really James Nobody? He's a spook, a spy. He uses different names. When you read the books and you watch the older films, he does have other identities. But in general, a spy, is James Bond even really within the world of James Bond? Is that even really his name? Could that be just some type of cover? You get the point. And the fact that you can derive Bond from the word nobody, literally, is also intriguing. So I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Then I looked at the description of the villain in the Seven Heads of the Green Dragon. And he is described as an Asian man who speaks impeccably in Oxford English. And he wears green gloves. Now, you other graybeards out there, you big hardcore fans of James Bond novels, who does that sound like? An Asian figure. I believe he wears Asian clothes too, Asian style clothes, and, got the gloves on and speaks impeccable English. Dr. No, perhaps? Now think of what I said about you can draw Bond from nobody. James Nobody is the secret agent in the novel who ultimately is brought before this character with the green gloves, the Asian man, mastermind who speaks impeccable English. And Dr. No, he wears gloves, right? Because his hands, are the pinchers, but he wears gloves. He's Asian, and he speaks perfect English. Come on. Okay. And his clothing is Asian influenced, and particularly in the film. Look at the film. So isn't it interesting that Bond, you can spell Bond from nobody, and you can get No as in Dr. No from the character's name. So I wondered, was Ian Fleming influenced by this Seven Heads of the Green Dragon? Then I thought more, wait a minute. Teddy Legrand his real identity has never truly been proven. What if it's a novel in French, okay? But what if Ian Fleming is the author, of that book, The Seven Heads of the Green Dragon? He, did speak French. He before the war, when he was younger, he had an ongoing affair with a French woman, kind of an upper class woman. with connections. And then, of course, during World War II, Ian Fleming was part of British intelligence running various operations, including, on and in and around French territory. So, with his command of the language, um, is it possible that Ian Fleming is the true author of the Seven Heads of the Green Dragon? And is it truly his first James Bond novel? Now, I am working on getting my hands on it because I want to read it, but it's certainly possible. Now, if that's the case, then the next set of questions start off with, okay, how much truth is in the legend? How much truth is in that novel? Okay, because Fleming wasn't ignorant of interesting occult things, occult with a small O. And it wasn't beyond him to put very real things into his known fiction. So we have to ask, okay, was there really this mystical, Order of the Green Dragon? Was there really, this Green Hand organization? Was there really this mastermind who wore green gloves, or did the green gloves just represent the green hand? Obviously, because the green hand is mentioned elsewhere and has some basis in I think some evidence. Was this Fleming's creative expression inspired by actual things he knew, actual things that were going on? You have to, the Order of the Black Dragon, when you look at the actual history that you can trace, they were very instrumental in pushing Japan into, World War II, specifically, into the alliance with Germany and getting into World War II. They were very influential in that. So you have to ask, therefore, if there was this Japanese Order of the Green Dragon, how influential were they in getting Japan to team up with the other Axis powers? I find it interesting that, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, Chiang Kai-shek's wife, one of his wife, she mentions in a personal journal the Green Dragon, as in the order. So, there is one potentially factual bit of evidence that there was some type of organization as such. Was the author of the Seven Heads of the Green Dragon, okay, was the author trying to tell people something with his novel? If Ian Fleming turns out to have actually, written that book under the name Teddy Legrand, I would be even more confident in my suspicion that there was something to this, that nugget of truth you guys hear me talk about all the time, right? Because people have looked at Fleming's other works as Bond stories, and they've pointed out a lot of actual, character renditions or situational renditions of historical people and historical events. If I'm not mistaken, like Aristotle Onassis is depicted in some of his work, and various other figures, and particularly the villains and such. But this green gloved figure in this Seven Heads of the Green Dragon is very much, in my mind, Dr. No. So even if Fleming wasn't the true author of that novel, there's no way he wasn't influenced by that novel. He had to have read it. He had to have basically lifted the imagery. Now, think about this. What if it was one of those Frenchmen, those French journalists? What if, the one who might have really been the author was one of Fleming's spies, French spies working against the Nazis in France? I could imagine a scenario where, he had a good relationship, association with Fleming, and particularly if Fleming was his handler, on-site handler, and you know, said, "Hey, man, if anything happens to me, it's yours. Do what you want with it." Right? I mean, I could see that happening, or or looking at the other side of human nature, Fleming could have said, "Oh, he's dead. I'm just going to steal that." Right? But you never know. But there's no way that that villain in that novel is not Dr. No. And I argue that James Nobody might be just as much the inspiration for James Bond as the name of the ornithographer who is credited because his name was James Bond. I think this James Nobody is somewhere in the mix, which all of this doesn't make the Green Dragon mystery order less of a mystery or less interesting on the mystical or occult levels, because Ian Fleming, okay, his work is chock full of this stuff. Just go take a look at Jay Dyer's analyses of the Bond movies and Fleming's books, just those alone. Jay Dyer has done some excellent analyses of the Bond material. And somewhere here on the horizon, a few years ago, Joseph Farrell and I worked out a concept and even already outlined the basics of our own book about some Ian Fleming stuff. I don't want to say what it is because it's going to be really cool, but we probably will approach that fairly soon. So, when I learned about this pulp novel, French pulp novel, the minute I read the description, heard the description, I should say, of the villain and the name, James Nobody, come on, what's going on here? I remind you too that Peter Fleming, Ian's brother, he was one of the people who went in search of Colonel Fawcett. There's a 1934 book titled Brazil Adventure, in which Peter Fleming documents his expedition in search of the lost, explorer Colonel Fawcett. Now, if you've read my Lost Expedition of Sir Richard Francis Burton, Secret Missions 2, you'll know my hypothesis that Burton, several decades before Fawcett, Burton went to the same lost city. And that, in my opinion, Fawcett's expedition, Fawcett's quest, was a follow-up to whatever remains classified that Burton reported about his undocumented and still to this day mysterious 5 months in the South American wilderness. Again, the Lost Expedition of Sir Richard Francis Burton. It's my second Secret Missions book. I highly recommend it if you're interested in this stuff. But there you have Peter Fleming, who I suspected was, also working on behalf of British intelligence. I mean, come on, look at his brother, what his brother was doing. You had you had these orders, the Order of the Black Dragon and allegedly the Order of the Green Dragon. Their agents were global, literally, okay? And they were just as much in South America as they were anywhere else. So in the 30s, when the skullduggery, of this Order of the Green Dragon is building up and allegedly going on, and whatever might have happened to inspire the novel Seven Heads of the Green Dragon is going on. You have Peter Fleming over there looking for the lost Colonel Fawcett, and with things happening that's looking more and more like world war is brewing, world conflict is brewing. If I'm right about Richard Burton's expedition, what I write in there and hypothesize there, if I'm right about that, then we're talking resources and secrets, potentially secret resources, who knows, of gold and such, that I don't think it's out of the question that England would have sent British intel representatives in pursuit of what might have happened to Colonel Fawcett. Because remember, that was less than 10 years before Fleming went looking for him. Now you have to realize that there were a lot of expeditions to go find Colonel Fawcett that set out, and several of them became lost themselves. But the point is, if British intelligence was looking for what happened to Fawcett, or what Fawcett might have found, no matter how much they knew about it from Burton, as I hypothesize, then I would argue that the Order of the Black Dragon, and logically the Order of the Green Dragon, would also have been interested in what happened to Colonel Fawcett, right? So again, there are reasons to suspect that they would have been in the mix, okay, in Latin America. We know about the German presence down there big time, right? So with Japan eventually becoming allied with Germany, okay, if the German agents are down there in the 30s, down there in South America, from my position, it's southeast, then certainly I think an organization like the Order of the Black Hand would have representation down there too, would have been wanting to know what was going on. So there is historical context to connect the Order of the Black Dragon to the Germans, the World War II era Germans, and therefore, if the Order of the Green Dragon truly did exist as such as the legend states, or anything close to it, then we can reasonably ask, okay, what kind of influence and connection did they have with the Germans? We know that Hoscheffer, who was a influence on Hitler, he became a member of a mystical order while in Japan, I believe, in the years before World War II. And when it was discovered that he had committed suicide, ultimately, one source says he took poison. Another source says he committed seppuku. I think I'm pronouncing that right. The traditional samurai, shoving the sword into one's own body. He was that. He killed his wife, and then he did that to himself, is the story. Now, some people might have gotten some of the details of the Hoscheffer story mixed up with the Baltic-born German that I mentioned before, because he too got involved with the deeper mystical orders. That's what I'm saying. Is there's so much mixed up in this that when you look at it more closely, you see what's probably not likely, but what is likely, actually, in my opinion, is just as equally fascinating. Um, so bringing it back to, the context of these mysterious Tibetans, the one with the green gloves, and they're found in Berlin, and you have this novel. I would say, it's my opinion presently that this legend that we're told about the Russians finding these Tibetan males in these uniforms and the one with the green gloves, I would say that most of that, if not the whole story, is likely not true. And the details inspired by that novel, that pulp novel, the Seven Heads of the Green Dragon. Um, what's an interesting consideration is if Fleming was either the actual author of that book or the author was one of these French journalists, and was working as an agent for Fleming, could the story about the bodies of the Tibetan males and the one with the green gloves, could that have simply been some disinformation plugged into the scenario and the situation by Ian Fleming? Some people have argued that the occult aspect and nature of what Nazi Germany was doing was not allowed to be considered. I don't think it was considered at Nuremberg. You got somebody in the live chat can probably correct me on that, but my understanding off the top of my head is that it was not allowed to be considered because it very possibly could have given the Nazi perps an out with the insanity plea, or somebody could have argued that on their behalf. So with all the crazy occult stuff going on, they could have done that and avoided execution and such. And of course, the Allied leaders did not want that to happen. So my understanding is that was why the stories of Hitler and Himmler and the Nazi occult stuff really didn't start to emerge in popular culture until years after the war, decades after the war was over, I think, a couple of decades, is because it was forbidden officially. So could that have been a context in which Ian Fleming, in this scenario I lined out, could have either planted disinformation or was trying to send a message? It would look like in the order of the events, the fact that you had this novel and then you had this thing planted, the order of the events looks like it would be disinformation planted. And that was a convenient thing, which then, later he would go on and say, that works in a novel. Okay. Or a story, my James Bond guy. But on the other hand, what if there's truth to all this? And this information was planted as an attempt to get people to look more closely at that aspect of it. What you'd really have to do is pinpoint when this story of, the green gloved man and the dead Tibetan males was first emerged. Because as we know, the whole thing about the Hanabu and all of that stuff related to it, that didn't emerge until decades after the war from very questionable, what we would call neo-Nazi sources. So if this stuff emerged, let's say in the late 50s, early 60s, again, remember, Morning of the Magicians does not specifically mention Order of the Green Dragon, okay? Or the guy with the green gloves, that kind of thing. So this just might be something that has spun up over the years as a result of first that pulp novel. But I am going to, when I get my hands on an English language translation of that novel, if I can, and when I talk with Rick Spence and dig into this a little bit, I'll be talking about the alleged Order of the Green Dragon at greater length because it is interesting. It does fascinate me. I do have, I should say, I'm in that camp. I've got one foot on that side of the line that I would love to believe the mystical story, right? Who wouldn't? In our community, it's fun stuff. But no matter how fun it is, if it's not true, then it just isn't. But I think it's going to be very interesting where this trail will lead, and I will, of course, probably have Rick come on one night. So the next time I talk about this subject, hopefully I'll have Rick Spence with me, and we can have a pretty interesting discussion on this topic. By then, hopefully, I will have read this novel. But where I'm at presently is the Order of the Green Dragon is a mystery that's looking like it has its roots in a pulp novel and might have been part of World War II disinformation intelligence intrigues, and certainly, in my opinion, is a direct influence on Ian Fleming's novel characters of Dr. No and James Bond himself. So, anyway, as these things are, this is an introductory discussion of a topic that I've never talked about. And on the introductory level, what it is basically you're just rolling out a rug, okay? A fabric, a rug, and you're looking at the threads that are sticking out along the rough edges, and you're just identifying the different threads. This is how these kinds of pursuits start. Okay, you just throw out there, hey, there's this thing. Let's take a look at the fabric of all this. Let's take a look at the rug of all this. So you just lay it out and you say, there's that, there's that, there's that. Okay, I'm going to be pulling these threads, and I'll let you know what I find in the near future. So that's what I'm doing here. Is I'm going to be pulling some threads on this and reporting on it again. So there we go. There's your introduction to the topic. Many of you probably have heard the story about the Tibetans and the man with the green gloves, and to some degree or another, perhaps many of you have never heard about it, but I think it's intriguing nonetheless. So I'm going to jump over to the I'm going to get out of full screen so that I can see the. Remember, folks, if you want to, I'm going to ask you to please stay on topic. I'll say that again. Please stay on topic until otherwise directed. Questions in all caps, comments in all caps, or if you put the little @ symbol with my name, you get the idea, you know the score. The rest of you, help someone out if you see they're doing it wrong, let them know. And I will start addressing questions and comments. Do, 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 do. So, okay, let me see. Thank you, Todd. Okay, actually, I can, in full screen, I can see where Malia is putting the comments and questions on the screen. So that's, if I get caught up in what's going on the scroll over there, I'll get distracted. So thank you, Todd. By the way, thank you, Johnny Side. Appreciate that. Johnny Side says, great topic. By the way, the Book of Werewolves is available now at the Lulu. Go to print on demand from Lulu, but go to lostconantlibrary.com and you'll be able to get to it. But it is available. This is the book that Todd edited with my assistance. Go back to that last comment. I'm sorry, I was yapping about my. Johnny Side says, never heard about it. Fascinating. Yeah, it's an interesting story, Johnny Side. One of those that's in 20th century mystical occult lore, connected with Nazi Germany. Also, I'll be releasing three more Talbot Mundy classic reprints here soon, and another set of adventure classics. It's going to blow your mind. I'm not going to identify them now. Masters Maniac Mexico says, hearty greetings from your German in Mexico again. Your program drags me in more and more as you partially tell my family's history. Thanks for your work, sir. Hey, sure. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's entertainment for the mind, I hope, Cardinal Sin. Great to see you, Walter. Please check your email when the show is over. Great topics tonight. Thank you. Thank you, Cardinal. I will do that. Definitely. And you have some things on the way to you in the mail, by the way. Robert Huffine. Walter Bosley, have you heard of the thorium miners wearing green gloves? No, I haven't. See, there's something interesting. Send me a DM, because we're Facebook friends. Send me a DM there with more details or links to this, Robert, because I definitely want to know about that. Oh, by the way, Lost Continent Library will be represented. I will have a table at the Fear Fair in San Bernardino, California, the weekend of January 13th through the 15th. So if you're anywhere, easy driving distance of San Bernardino, come to that event. It's at the Orange Show grounds. And that, folks, for you Empire of the Wheel fans and readers, is the site of the original Urbita Springs Park amusement park area. Okay. So it's got some serious San Bernardino Empire of the Wheel history there, that location. But that's Fear Fair, San Bernardino, California, January 13th through 15th, 2023. Any more comments, questions about the topic? Let me see while I'm waiting for that. Let me see if there's something else. No, nothing on that. Again, the book that I mentioned earlier, Christopher Hale's Himmler's Crusade, a good book on the Tibetan expeditions from, again, a traditional history perspective. Okay, so another subject which I see fascinated everybody in the live chat by the numerous questions and comments I'm receiving. So I'll open it up to whatever you guys want to ask me or comment on in the live chat. Okay, let me see. Maybe I'm. Cool, Megalith. Thank you. And you guys don't have to have comments and questions. Let me see. There was. Okay, just in case, if you could give me a page number that's on, I can find that because I'd like to see it. Okay, Montoris says, there we go. The Green Dragon Tavern, established in 1654, the Green Dragon was a favorite haunt of Paul Revere. Interesting when you consider, hidden secrets of the American Revolution, right? Green Dragon sauce at Trader Joe's is one of my favorite condiments, for what that's worth. Del Shall Farrell and Tesla walk into a bar. That's a good one. I've started watching The Green Knight, Cardinal. Almost as I find again. I got to get back and finish it. Thank you, Robert. Megalithic asks, is there any good documentation of Tibetans in Germany around the war? Most of what I'm familiar with is, right, the rumors and the apocryphal tales. When you look at China versus Japan during the war, Japan was allied, with Germany. So therefore, but China and Tibet, are at odds. So, conceivably there could have been, Tibetan association with the Axis powers, honestly, I haven't dug too deeply into that yet. Like I said, I'm just beginning to pull threads on this little topic, and I will be talking about it again. Let's see. Let me go back to. I'm gonna get out of the room and just go back to the full screen, and I'm gonna address what pops up on the screen. Rat Nose Terry. Walter Bosley channel. Will you do a video on how you were taught to read the Odyssey? Maybe. Maybe not. I was taught by a mentor. And as anyone who's been mentored will tell you, you have to decide, do you share everything? I don't know if I would share it so widespread, but I have shared it with trusted individuals on an individual basis. Just in case says, I've noticed it, and we'll come back to the page numbers when I get my copy. It is stowed away in a box on my home island visiting. Okay, cool. Yeah, just let me know. Curious that it would be mentioned in the German and French versions, but not the English version. But yeah, I'd like to. That'd be really interesting. Megalithic Yard says David Hatcher Childress makes a good case for long-range German planes being able to reach Tibet. Oh yeah. Look, my perspective is I don't have any problem with there being a presence of, Tibetan, a Tibetan organization or Tibetan individuals having some type of presence in Germany during the war. For whatever reasons, however that would reflect upon those particular individuals, I don't have a problem with the possibility that, and it's true, I don't have a problem with the possibility that the story we're told is true. I mean, who knows how some German insider could have been influenced by that novel, right? Or think about this. What if these Tibetan individuals were kind of a provocation, a double agent thing going on? What if they were modeled after stuff that an intelligence officer had read in that novel years before and said, hey, let's see how how far the Germans will buy this. So maybe those Tibetans that were found dead were actually double agents for the Allies. Okay. And we're pulling a scam, an occult themed scam on their German targets. Maybe that's why they were found dead. I mean, could they have been executed because, the Germans suspected that that's what I mean, when you've got that novel and you've got its obvious similarity to a major Ian Fleming novel, and you've got Ian Fleming as an intelligence officer in the mix. You have to consider that maybe these Tibetan individuals were indeed some type of double agent for the Allies, and that is a thread that I will be pulling as well. I'm intrigued by this story, like a lot of people are, and I want to definitely learn more about it, so I could perhaps, present to you guys what I find. This is what it's like, the phrase "how sausage is made," right? This is what it's like when you start pursuing information that can ultimately result in a book. Is it seems like it's just a bunch of threads you're pulling. And what I'm doing by doing reports like this is sharing with you that process, the early stage. Tim Houston says, but why are the Tibetans there? Well, the implication is that they're there for mystical, occult purposes. That's what's, what's implied by the story being told within the context of, Nazis and occultism. So Ratnose Terry says, have you ever read Spy Counter Spy by Dusko Popov on the double agent thread? I think I've heard of that, but I've not read it. I don't know if you know my background, Ratnose Terry, but I was chief of a counter-espionage operations branch when I was in the Air Force, which is double agentry. I heard Pierce Tessier Ashpool says, I heard Nepal was supposed to be where the Nephilim came from or landed. I'm sure they would have been interested in that. Yeah. Yes, I'm sure they would have been interested in that. Whatever happened with the Nephilim, wherever, it's, your guess is as good as mine. Just in case, it's no surprise that Tibetans were present in Nazi Germany, considering that Hochschiffer and other high-ranking Nazis were much inspired by Buddhism and used its symbolism, such as the swastika. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is there's enough historically to argue that, of course, there could have been some type of Tibetan contingency there. What's interesting too? Here's what's interesting. Think about the post-Operation Paperclip influence on the American intelligence community, very specifically as deftly laid out by both dark journalist and Joseph Farrell and some others, the post-war Nazi association, starting with the Gehlen ring, right? And the Nazi connection to the CIA. Okay, now the CIA has been very enthusiastically involved, had its hands in the Free Tibet movement. Okay. And as you know, I have hanging above me here a B-17 that I painted all flat, stealthy black because in the late 50s, 58 specifically, I think, the CIA used World War II surplus B-17s, painted them black, and they trained Tibetan commandos and then returned to the Himalayas, and they airdropped commandos into the zone in the late 50s who they would be there working against, the Chinese control and such. So and the CIA was very much involved in the Free Tibet movement, right up until our times. So look at that involvement from the perspective of, well, the CIA, which came out of the OSS, but it originated in with the post-war era, and it has that Nazi German influence. Well, maybe the CIA's enthusiastic support of the Free Tibet movement is because Tibet had kind of an allied association with Nazi Germany, okay? And that Nazi German influence on our CIA, just kind of moved right into the CIA's support and activities for Tibet. That's something to consider. That's what pops up in my mind. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that we have these stories about the Nazis and Tibetan mystics, and this connection to Tibet, and we know they went there, and then golly, right after the war, our new intelligence agency, heavily influenced by and connected to former Nazis and Nazi spies and Nazi agents, they get enthusiastically involved in the Free Tibet movement. Like maybe those, post-war former Nazis now associated with CIA or in the CIA were, still wanting to do the Tibetans a favor. I don't know. You have to consider that, I think, in this. So that's interesting. Gustavo Garcia Echeverria asked, wasn't Lobsang Rampa a German soldier of the SS who stayed in Tibet till the end of the war? You know what? Gosh, I got a couple of those Rampa books. I don't recall an SS connection. My gosh, I'll have to revisit those. But remember, I think those are kind of, what do they call that? Factional fiction or something. I forgot his real name. Dion Williams says the swastika and the cross were also used in very early times in Norse mythology. Yes. Both symbols have been around a very, very long time. Just in case says the SS even collected Aryan bees in Tibet. LOL. Yeah, Aryan bees. Okay. Ratnose Terry, you totally should. I know a little bit about your background, but about as much as anyone can know. I appreciate your feedback. I'm glad I made it in time to have some questions answered. Thanks. Sure, Ratnose Terry. That's what I try to do here is yeah, Tim Houston, that's what I was thinking. He was an Englishman. English civil servant. Think about that. That kind of sounds a little bit like Conway in Lost Horizon, the English diplomat who, goes native when he goes to Shangri-La, and, his last scene racing up the mountain. Farah Jade says he was supposedly a product of transmigration, where the soul of the English guy was knocked out of his body and replaced by the soul of the Tibetan Lama. Indeed, that's right. Yeah. I'm going to have to revisit those books. Those are fun. I have the Cave of Ancients right over there on the back shelf. Just in case says the Nazis spent more money on research in the occult and issues such as the magical meaning of the hats worn at Eton University than the U.S. spent on developing the first nuclear bomb. That's interesting. Cardinal Sin says, but the swastika that was used in Buddhism was facing the other way. That is true. It meant peace. The Nazis turned it around the opposite direction to imply war and domination. Absolutely true. Yep, they did do that. Megalithic. Yes, you're right. Rampa was English, maybe Canadian, right? But I was thinking he was English. We put our Christmas tree up the other night. Looks great. I'll post some photos. Like I said, we're going to be having I'm going to be having some more Talbot Mundy and stuff. Now, the next book up that's of importance, real importance to you guys, that people have been asking me about, the very next special release that's number one on my desk right now, finally, without distraction, is Secheree's Wonder of the Worlds in hardcover. So I'm working on getting that out to you guys as soon as possible, but I want it done right. So it'll take however long it takes. But what I'm trying to say is it's at a stage where we're talking just maybe a few weeks. Okay. So that's how close it actually is to being done and ready. I'm not going to rush that one. But it has moved greatly forward. Much progress was made on that while I was doing all the other stuff that popped up on my plate. So, and there are going to be more. I've been threatening you guys with this for a month. There are going to be more midweek little reports here. Carnelson asks, what's next on your model building list? Don't you think you'll get Forbidden Saucer by the end of the year? Oh, hell no. Well, wait a minute, Cardinal Sin. Actually, I'm glad you asked that, because last night I was thinking that what I can start getting to, and yes, to answer your question, I think I can get to this for the end of the year. I can start on the interior, okay? Because that model, as you guys know, it's literally, 3 feet across. That's like multiple models, and the interior is its own separate model. But I was thinking last night, I want to get started on the interior, so I will be starting that. But I've also got, hang on to that Johnny side question there, keep it on the screen. I've also got the fuel tank truck. I've got some of the other ones. Now I got to go back. Some of the ones that Megalith sent me over, that I worked on over the last year or so, I'm going back and doing, touching up, and some of them aren't finished on the little details. So I'm going back and finishing those up too. But I have an F-22. I've got the Russian jet. But yeah, I'm pretty confident I can officially start on the interior of the Forbidden Planet saucer. Johnny Side asks, any good news on the TV series? Oh, you're tempting me. You're tempting me to talk. I'm sworn to silence, but you guys send your positive energy, because we're literally just like the thickness of a sheet of paper away from finding out. And it's looking good so far, looking very good. But just keep your fingers crossed, because we're at that stage where any word could come at any time, is what I'm saying. Important question. Are you a Robert Louis Stevenson fan? Other than what I read when I was in school, I wouldn't say I'm a fan, but I don't dislike Stevenson. I mean, he wrote some of the greatest literature, in the English language and in American history. So I dig, basically his stuff. I am also appearing in a series, which I'm not really at liberty to say too much about it, but my producer, she has, in the meantime, while we were making our things happen, she was out there putting together, I think it's the pilot. I don't know if it's the first season, the completed first season. It's definitely the pilot of a series that she's putting together, and I'm in that. And she showed me the trailer, but I don't know if she has released it yet publicly. So, if you guys recall, last year I was flown to Denver. I posted some photos of me, of the hotel I was staying in, and when I was on the plane and everything. And that's what I was doing there in Denver. And she she showed me the trailer the other day. And so, there I am. And I'm wearing those big god-awful glasses I used to wear. Yeah, I look different from one thing to the next. In Mirage Men, there's that, which is years ago. And then there's this thing last year, and I look even different now. I'm a chameleon, So anyway, any more questions or comments? You've been kind of stuck with me doing these solo reports because we're at the holiday time, and I do have about 5 guests lined up already. That means people I've spoken to, and they've asked me to give them till after the first of the year because, one of them's traveling at the time. I believe is still traveling somewhere out of the US, and a couple of the others just have stuff going through the holidays. So, these are I think you're going to find the guests very interesting. They're people their names. I'll give you a little teaser. Joshua Cutchin said he's going to come on. Joseph Farrell, he's going to come on in the coming year, 2023. And I've got a couple of others I'd rather surprise you with. But yes, I will start having guests more regularly once we get into the new year, once we get beyond the holidays. But I do intend to have 1 or 2 more guests, between now and the end of the year in the remaining weeks that we have. And I'm going to be working on one for next Sunday. And we will hopefully that we'll be able to make that happen. And, but hang in there with me, just being just me here, a little bit longer, because pretty soon I'm going to start presenting things more interestingly around here. So there's that. So yeah, TV show is very, very close. I'll share with you some stuff. The network that wants it really, really loves the idea. They love what we've done, what we've put together. They're deeply intrigued by the research that we put together and the evidence that we found. I think, oh man, I think it's going to be a go. And you guys are going to find it really interesting, really entertaining, I think, if we get a yes. And it does have a connection to the Empire of the Wheel stuff and the Origin stuff, the stuff in the book Origin. So I think you guys are going to find it. Now, remember, the Empire of the Wheel series is a dramatic telling, okay? And yes, the producer is still talking with people on that, but this other series that we're close to getting greenlit, this she's confident will more easily lead into the dramatic Empire of the Wheel series. So this would be a stepping stone into that, or a launch pad, you could say. Rui Gonsalves says, very nice and cool. Yes, Walter. Hey, that's I want to keep things interesting here for you guys and keep you coming back. Tim Houston, you sure are portrayed as the mystery man and Mirage Man. Oh, geez. Yeah, that's wow, Mirage Man. That Mion Torres says, well, Teddy Legrand is suspected to have been Pierre Mariel, French Grand Master of the AMORC and a member of the Martinus Order. He is suspected, Mion Torres, to have been that individual, but it's not certain. Pierce Tessier Ashpool says, off-topic question. What did your mentor tell you to read, do, and look into when you started out? He told me how to read the Odyssey and the Iliad. He told me to specifically read reincarnation stuff relative to Edgar Cayce. Now remember, this was back in the mid 80s. Walter Bosley channel, will you be bringing Ratnose Terry S, will you be bringing Rick Spence in anywhere to discuss any further books? Well, as I said earlier, I want to bring him on when I, for starters, when I address this subject again. But also when more is happening with Empire of the Wheel, I definitely want to bring him on then too. So yeah, Rick will be one of those in 2023 that I plan to bring on. Cardinal says, I have to split some level of the fam, and don't forget to check your. I will check it. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night. So I'm sure you guys saw the rollout on the B-21, the Air Force's new bomber, which still isn't being activated for field deployment yet. It's still got to go through its test phase. But that was interesting. I watched the Ward Carroll YouTube channel discussion that he had with a Air Force veteran pilot who knows about procurement and things like that. So as far as the models go, let me see. Let me flip on this one here just for a moment. I could reach over there and show you. There we go. Nope. You know what? What I'll do is I'll do a model building episode, and I'll mark it as such, and I'll tag it as such. Remember to go to. I'm not jumping off here. I just want to remember to say this. Remember to go to lostcontentllibrary.com, and you're going to find links to the books there. Remember, don't go to Amazon if you're looking for my books. If you're new here, Amazon is not good for small press publishers, and I am a small press guy. I'm actually a micro press, you could say, I guess. And so it's just not a good deal for me to try to sell on Amazon. So it's better for me to sell direct the way I do. My Lulu page in with lostcontentllibrary.com, you can go right over there. And also you'll be able to link to the fiction that I publish, the reprints, as well as the stuff I've written and such. But there's going to be links there to the film work that I'm doing. And when TV stuff happens, there will be a link to that. So anyway, I hope tonight was interesting to any new viewers. Again, as I said, when I do these kinds of reports, this is a way to kind of give you an inside look on how I work on these things. I'm intrigued by something, so I just start taking looks at it, right? I see what's out there, and I make my notes. The things that pop up as flags for me as this novel, the potential Ian Fleming connection, and on and so forth, as I talked about, these are the things then that become major threads that I want to pull, that I see jumping out at me. And as I've said in the past, if I find enough to justify a book, that's when I commit to the book. One thing I don't do, even if I say I'm interested in doing a book on someone or something, I won't really commit to that unless I'm finding enough to justify a book. I'm not one of those who says, "Oh, I got to crank out a product. Okay, I got to crank out a UFO book or a Lost Expedition book or one of these things." So just pull a bunch of stuff together and crank out a book. I don't do that. It takes some thin premise and just fluff it up with a bunch of disconnected, or very flimsy nonsense just to have a book. I don't do that. I've never done that. I look at something enough and then determine, what? Is there a book here? Okay, I'll proceed. There's not a book here, or there's not yet a book, then that gets put aside. And, I work on something else. So, that's how that is. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate it. And we are at the hour and a half point, which, as I say, 90 minutes of Walter Bosley is enough for anyone. So I appreciate you guys who showed up and in the live chat, and those of you who are just watching this, whether it's in live chat or not. And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. You also find Lost Content Library on an Instagram. And I will, of course, be back next Sunday. And I thank you again, everyone. And we'll see you next time. Have a good night.